Hello, everybody. My name is Marsh, and welcome to my review of The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, Episode 1 and Episode 2. Let's jump into it. So for this video, we're going to have two sections. We're going to cover both Episode 1 and 2 at once. The first section is going to be a spoiler-free section. The second section, I'll give you a warning, but it's going to be spoiler-filled, going into the plot and what happened with that. So, let's go ahead and jump into the spoiler-free part of this review. So, The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. I'm going to give you some pros, and I'm going to give you some cons. And we'll weigh the two, and I'll give you an overall rating of what I think about it as well. So for the spoiler-free aspect of it, we'll start off with a pro. The first pro I want to give the show is with its visuals. It's probably the best-looking fantasy show out there right now. Better than Wheel of Time, Witcher, multiple other things, honestly. I don't think there's really anything in the class, which is expected with a $1 billion budget. You better be the best looking fantasy show. There's even at times like an ethereal feeling, especially with the elves, like where it's just otherworldly and really captures Middle Earth well. I think there was only like one time throughout the whole show that like the special effects were like a little wonky to me. I'm like, I don't know about that. But it was really one minuscule moment for like a few seconds throughout the whole thing. But overall, the visuals are beautiful. And that is one of the major pros of the show so far. Now, let's go ahead and switch it over and talk about a con of the show as well. Probably the first con, I would say, is the overall plot at the moment. It's okay for now. It's very slow. It doesn't help me get intrigued. Usually with the first episode, you want some type of hook, some type of intriguing mystery, something to get a hold of. But there's nothing really that hooks you. Yes, there is some mysteries to be solved, but the pacing is very, very slow, which is totally expected considering the first extended cut of the first Lord of the Rings movie was 4 hours. So it's not totally out of the range of what's expected, but it is taking its time, and with what they gave us with the first two episodes, I don't know if it really does the best job of hooking you into the show, to be honest. And that's probably my biggest flaw with it right now. Everything's just okay story-wise. The visuals bring it up a little bit higher, but the story is just okay. The dialogue has a few issues, but I'll go into that later. I'll switch back to another pro for now, though. The next pro I have so far is with the world building. I think it did a pretty decent job at explaining the world so far, what we're dealing with, who the people are. There's oftentimes in fantasy shows it takes forever to get to know everything, and that's somewhat expected here as well, but it does a decent job at setting things up and going forward. It builds up that structure. A lot of people coming in will already have that built up with previous stuff with Lord of the Rings, but the work that it does right now is pretty decent, I would say, with building the world, the mythos, and what's going on and what's going to happen going forward. The next con I have is with some of the characters. There's a few characters that they kind of make you hate at first. At least for me, the one that's the main protagonist or is portrayed to be the main protagonist in the start of the story, that particular character I have no connection with and I actually kind of dislike her, to be honest, with the way they portrayed her. Not the character itself, but more like how the character's acting and the actions they're taking and what they're doing. It makes me kind of dislike them, which is surprising because it's not a character people really dislike. I'm not going to say who it is for spoiler reasons, but it was surprising because I wasn't expecting to dislike them as much as I did. And we'll see if they're getting a little bit better, but we'll see how that progresses and how their overall arc is. I'm not going to judge it completely now since it's only the first two episodes on that, but I am having trouble connecting to some of the characters, such as the main protagonist, and then there's another character who's a love interest that I'm not very interested in, as well as both sides of that couple. So there's a lot of characters that I just don't care about. There's no reason for me to pay attention to them, and that's the biggest problem I think at the moment, outside of like the overall plot just being okay, is there's no connection or anything to entice me to feel a connection with the characters. One pro I do want to give it, however, is there is great music as well in the show. This is where that budget comes into place with the $1 billion Amazon Lord of the Rings show. The budget is spent well in the visuals, at least, like I mentioned before, but the music is pretty good as well. There is something with the way they edit the music that annoys me a bit, which I'll talk about in a second here, but the overall music and theming and how it's orchestrated is good, and it isn't actually copying much off the Lord of the Rings, which is surprising because that has one of the most legendary soundtracks, But it's also a good thing to bring your own soundtrack and try to make something famous on your own. So we'll see how that goes and what people think about it. But that leads me into my next point, which is also a con, which I don't know if a lot of people will pick up on this, but the way they edited this really bothered me. Like, for example, a lot of scenes had the music going through the scene the whole time. There wasn't very many scenes where they just turned off the music, let the atmosphere and the characters and the feelings of what's being portrayed in that scene just be cemented. It's a small thing that a lot of people won't notice, but with a lot of shows, even in Game of Thrones, for example, the original Game of Thrones, there were scenes where there was no music playing. It's good to use music to emphasize the emotions in a scene, but I feel like they were using the music as a crutch in a way, if that makes sense. Every single emotion in every single scene had a piece of music behind it. There was always some type of violin, some type of strings playing in every single scene. There was no point where I could just rest and enjoy the scene for itself. Or if they're having an intense moment with two characters talking to each other, you can't just have them talk and have that awkward silence. They were afraid to have awkward silence, which I think is important especially when the characters are having an awkward moment or a contentious moment. You need that silence to emphasize the moment. But they had that musica and the orchestra going the whole time. It's a small thing, but it annoyed me at a point because I'm like, can we just get a serious moment without the music? Like, it's okay to have music, but don't use it like a crutch, if that makes sense. That's sort of a nitpick on my end. I know I'm emphasizing it, but it's one thing that really bothered me about the first two episodes. Even though the music's great, they used it like a crutch. So overall, right now, honestly, I'd probably give it a 5.5 out of 10 for the first two episodes. Without going into spoilers, I may talk about it a little more going forward, but the first two episodes at about a 5.5. I'm still interested. I'm still going to keep going on. We'll see how it all wraps up. It can go up, honestly. Right now, it's more like it's just the beginning of a movie. It's like a part one. It's a straight movie playing through. It's not structured in an episodic way where it stops. Episode one has its own climax and ending. It's just continuous. And so if it's continuous for the whole season, yes, you can watch the whole season through. But that doesn't necessarily benefit for week-to-week watching, which they're doing with the release schedule. So if you're going to do a week-to-week watch, how are you hooking people week-to-week is the thing. That's how you get people to talk about the show. Look at Game of Thrones, week-to-week. Red Wedding, whoa, look at that, talking about what's going to happen on the next episode. People discuss the whole week what's going to happen. If you're not intriguing them and not giving them plot points week-to-week, why are people going to want to watch week-to-week? You might as well release it as one full show if you're not going to structure it episodically. If you're going to have it be one continuous story, structure it as a full show. So those are my major complaints and my major compliments when it comes to it. I know I sound a little bit more negative and harsh, but Lord of the Rings has a special place in my heart. No, I'm not like a major book reader of the series, but I have watched the movies multiple times, and it was always it's probably my favorite movie trilogy, actually, and so I do take it to heart, and it does bother me in certain aspects when they're handling things in certain ways, and I'll go into detail into that in the spoilers here in a second, but overall, it's a 5.5. We'll see how it goes. If it gets better, it's possible. With the whole thing, how it wraps up at the end, it could be amazing. And then it could be something where it's continuous and we sit through the whole thing. So we'll see. Okay. Now on to the spoilers. So for the spoilers, I'm going to do the same thing with the pros and cons. I'm going to go in more in depth with those pros and cons that I discussed and explain what exactly happened with those. So the first pro I mentioned is the visuals. The visuals are amazing. When they show all the cities, all the landscapes, they all look great. Even the practical effects, like you can tell the set was built, is the thing, and it was built well. There's only a few moments where the visuals ever took me out. I think in the ice cave, there's a few moments when I looked at the set and I'm like, okay, it's a little polished in a certain way. Like it was just tiny. It was in the back of my mind. I'm like, ooh, that clicked, which shouldn't be clicking because you don't want to get taken out of it at any time. And then when Galadriel was having her speech about the tree, and the tree going down, and it showed it burning. When it was burning, it looked a little weird. But that's about it for the visuals. Everything else looked amazing for that. And going into the first con I had about the show, and that was about its plot in general. Everything is just plotting and slow paced, and it's really hard to get connected with all the characters. Starting with Galadriel, they kind of make her a character you hate. She's being an ass, honestly, to her whole command. We get it, she's sad that her like brother died and everything, but it's the way that she just portrays everything isn't she doesn't seem like a human or like she has empathy towards anyone, honestly. She's just worried about herself, and she's on this like massive revenge plot to kill, even though Morgoth is the one that killed her brother. She's like trying to kill Morgoth's servant, Sauron in this case, or find him, even though Sauron isn't the one who killed the brother, he's just a servant. And so she's just in a revenge plot mode, which are some of my least favorite characters when their whole story is just based around revenge and seeking that revenge. I feel like they could have done her a little bit better. She's a much more interesting character. They could have given her better motives. And she just is contentious the whole time. She acts like a know-it-all. And it kind of like grinded on me the way that she was acting. I don't know. I feel like they just could have done her better. Along with that, the way she like delivers her lines is very weird. It's very, how do I say? Everything sounds like a monologue when she's talking to me. Like she's always trying to give a speech. Everything she says always has to have so much weight. I feel like they don't have that nonchalantness in their dialogue or the way they're saying it. It is there in other parts. When Elrond is speaking to Durin, for example, they have some great moments there. And not everything needs to be delivered in such a grand, majestic way. I don't know if that's the way they want to do it, but that's how I feel like everything's coming off with the way she speaks and with the way that a lot of other characters speaks. It feels like they're acting. It doesn't feel like they are there in a world and just being them. It feels like they're acting. And that's only a few characters, mostly Galadriel, and then a lot of the stuff with the elf dude and the woman in the human town. They're like the main parts that are like bothering me with acting and plot and dialogue are those particular ones. I can't get connected to those people. But the good parts, I would say, is that of the dwarves. That is probably the best part in the first 2 episodes is the dwarves. The connection between Elrond and Durin, and especially when Durin was talking about why he was angry at Elrond, because he missed the birth of his 2 children, he missed his wedding, all these things, and he's like, dude, I don't live forever like you. Yes, 20 years is a blink of an eye to you, but that's a whole lifetime to me. You missed my life. You left and ignored me for 20 years. And you expect to just come back and be there. Yes, that's nothing in your lifetime, in your perspective. But you missed half of my life. And it was really touching the way he said it all. And especially, I love Durin's family, Disa. She actually did a really good job. I know she was getting a lot of flack online for just being her portrayal in general. A lot of the Tolkien community has issues with the way they portray characters. If it's not 100% accurate to it, they will hate on it very much so. But I thought she delivered pretty well. And they had a little thing where originally the women dwarves have beards, and you could see she had some stubble like on the side. So that was a little like a little clue, like, yeah, they have beards. She probably just shaves kind of thing. But I thought she did well as Durin. Durin did really well. And his whole family, and especially at the dinner, that was probably the best scene, my favorite moment of the whole first 2 episodes. And the other thing that I find that's really done well is the intriguing of the mystery. Not necessarily with Morgoth and Sauron. I don't think they're doing a well job at that, because I think we kind of all know who Sauron is, the Halbrand character. Like, I'm just assuming. I haven't read the books. I don't know if Halbrand is Sauron, but it just seems pretty obvious to me. Here's this mysterious pretty boy that just shows up in the ocean randomly. He's evil enough to kill his whole people to get with Galadriel and all of that. He just seems obviously like Sauron. Let's just call it what it is. That's not an amazing mystery. The good mystery is with the Maya-like creature. He's not Gandalf, from what I've heard. He looks like Gandalf, and I think some people that are only seen the movies and don't know anything about Silmarillion are probably going to think he's Gandalf, but he's not. At least I hope he's not. We'll find out. If he is, that's going to be something. We'll see how they do that. But he's very intriguing, especially with the way he reacts to everything, and looks like in some way he has to be an angelic being, because he's like controlling things. Like when he's broke the stick, at the same time the foot of Nora's father broke. And so he has some type of power that we obviously don't know, and some type of language and hearing. I think he's a Maya. I don't know. We'll find out more about that specifically. And then going into that, since I mentioned Nora, we can talk about the Harfoots a little. I thought their parts were pretty decent. They were interesting in the fact that it was a little lighthearted and you got this little like comedy session and all of that. It could be a little annoying, like, and at first. I know there's a lot of contention around the Harfoots because the hobbits weren't in the Silmarillion or in the Second Age, but they brought them here in the form of Harfoots, and obviously they are related. Calling people like Brandyfoot, Brandybuck, like come on, like they're hobbits. You just need an excuse, Amazon, to bring hobbits in. But it's okay. I'll let you get away with it for now. But they were fine. They did their job. They were serviceable and they're more enjoyable. They're one of the better communities that we saw so far in the show. And so I didn't really have much issue with them. Hopefully they get a little bit more development. But then again, the real story is around who the person is that Nora found. That's the real intriguing thing and the real thing that we look forward to. And finally, I just want to talk about the elf dude that's falling in love with the human. I don't remember the elf guy's name. Sorry, I apologize. But that's probably like one of the harder parts of this storyline because I don't think the portrayal is done very well for these particular people. So starting with the woman that he's in love with, she's kind of a bad mother. Like you leave your son randomly to go follow an elf dude who's going to check on poison. I'm pretty sure the elf can handle it himself, but you run off for a whole day and leave your son so that he could get attacked by goblins. And so you're kind of like a bad mom, to be honest. And she looks way too young to be his mom in the first place. But I guess it's medieval like times, or it's not medieval because it's not Earth per se. But so I guess she could be old enough. But the whole thing with the village and like the way they treat them, and obviously they're looked down upon because they used to follow Morgoth, and that's why the elves are watching them. They don't understand why they're being discriminated by the elves and stuff, and they're not even really being discriminated. They're just being watched, and they're just kind of annoying and like pricks, to be honest. They don't listen. They're just like stereotypical like thug kind of dudes, and it's like, really? Okay, that's fine. We'll flesh it out. We'll move on after they all move to the city. We'll see what happens with them. But I was just like hoping for a little bit better characterization throughout like all the characters instead of like, here's generic thug number one that doesn't like an elf because he's an elf. Like, okay, that's nice. They didn't do anything to you. It's been like hundreds of years, and like Immortal is really gonna like say like, oh, it's been a long time and that you've been judging us and things like that. It's like, bro, like they know more than you. No offense, they know what happened. They literally fought a war against Morgoth, and you're gonna like claim that they're wrong. So it's a little stupid like that, and especially with her son. Her son's kind of stupid, like finding the blade, not saying anything. It's obviously a Morgoth thing, but I don't know if he knows about Morgoth necessarily. But he's obviously getting set up as like a villain, so we'll see what happens with that. And what else? I think that's basically it overall. I mean, obviously there's other stuff that happened, but in terms of my thoughts and spoiler-wise, my thoughts, that's about it. And that's kind of what I think about it overall. Yeah, 5 out of 5. Or sorry, 5.5 out of 10. I would give it right now. Maybe a 6 if we're lucky. We'll see. It could bump up to like an 8, depending how the whole season goes per se, but we'll see how it goes throughout week to week. I'll try to do a review every week of the episode. I know I'm a little late this week. Sorry, I apologize. I was at a concert for Joji. If you listen to him, he's pretty good. If you've never heard of him, look up Glimpse of Us. It's a pretty sad song, but he makes good music that I enjoy. So I was at a concert, so I didn't get to upload as quick as I like this week, but I'll stay on track for the next upcoming weeks. Other than that, though, tell me what you thought of the episode. What did you like? What did you dislike? What do you think overall? Any theories going forward? Don't give any spoilers if you read the books and you know what happens. Please don't. If you want to correct certain things and aspects, go ahead, but don't give any spoilers. Other than that, though, I will see you guys later. Thank you for watching. If you could like and subscribe, that would be amazing. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.